MBA's international students, this one is for you. Today, we're also going to a VC fund that has community banks as their LPs. And well, today we will welcome Ramika to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you bringing me over here and giving the opportunity to talk to so many students and people who aspire to break into venture capital.
Yeah, well, really looking back, right? And when you connect the dots all the way back to your childhood, what life experiences and career roles that has made you to become the VC are right now at, Bank Tech Ventures?
All the way back to childhood. I think I've always had this love for technology. Back in school, my first memory in technology would be working on a Windows 95 and then Windows XP, Vista, and then how all the various window versions came in. And I think I always was very in on gaming and I was playing GTA Vice City and Need for Speed and whatnot. And we would, install these Norton antivirus and McAfee antivirus whole system. And then I remember switching to a MacBook. And same for our mobile phones, how we had like this black and white Nokia phone. Then you had your Blackberry, and then you had your touch screens came up, and then you finally switched to an iPhone. So I think, and I also studied some C, C++ in my high school, some HTML. And then, I don't know if you know this, everybody in India studies engineering. Everybody wants to be an engineer or a doctor, but I was always very bright, but I was also very creative. So while my friends went on to study engineering, I wanted to study the front end of it. I wanted to study UI, UX design. I wanted to study motion graphics and filmmaking and animation. And I ended up being a very good graphic designer and animator. And back in my undergrad, I started freelancing on Upwork and Fiverr, if you know these platforms, and I was selling websites and logos and small animation. So I think I would be 16 or 17 years old at the time when I started making tons of money from my freelance work, and I was selling to people sitting in other countries, small businesses. I think that's when the entrepreneurship spirit, I got to know that, hey, I can make money. And that's when I became more ambitious. So I come from a very small town, and it's in Amritsar in Punjab. It's in the northern part of India. So very small city. So I moved to New Delhi, which is in 2017, last semester of my undergrad. I went to do an internship in a startup. It was the first time that I saw a VC. So our CEO, the founder, he brought in a couple of VCs and he pitched to them right in front of us. It was like an open setup. And I think that's my first memory of seeing a venture capitalist. This was 2017. Then I worked in another startup. It's called Internshala. They were an edtech startup and they were creating these online courses. And my job was to, design and animate those courses. And I met with so New Delhi at that time, the capital city of India, was also the startup hub of India. And I met with so many founders there. And from there, I realized that if this person can do a startup, so can I. I have the same two eyes, two hands, one brain. What am I doing wrong that these people are doing right? And I remember calling up my father and just telling him that, hey, I don't want to do this job. I want to do my own startup. I haven't figured it out, but I bored. And I moved back to my small city and thought about what I wanted to do. Parallelly, I did join my family business, which is in textiles. And then I founded my own startup called Brokemate, which was a vegan handbags brand. It was a D2C brand, e-commerce first, because I had studied all of these website design and digital marketing. It was very easy for me to make that website, make a logo on my own, and then kick it off. And I think after first year of the business, I was doing so well in terms of the brand awareness and digital marketing that I was featured by Cosmopolitan, Elle, Condé Nast Traveler, all the big magazines at the time, the big media at the time, and the biggest fashion weeks of India. They were inviting me to come and attend, and I also ended up advising the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, on a project, and they were trying to do something about vegan leather. So, but I was doing it all from a very small city, and I didn't have the kind of exposure that my competitors did. And parallelly, a new competitor came in the market, and they had studied from Harvard of India. They had studied from the top business school, and they were like 15 years elder to me. And I think I was still 22, 23 years old at the time. And yeah, so I think the kind of growth that my competitor brought, I didn't have that growth. And I think that was when I realized that I need to get out of this city and I need to this is a founder problem. There were a lot of VCs who had started to reach out to me directly. Instead of me going out to them, they were coming to me and they were like, hey, we want to invest in homegrown Indian brands. Let's have a conversation. And at that time, I just did not have the right risk capacity to tell somebody that, hey, give me $1 million and I'll give you 5 million back. And I didn't have that understanding of finance and definitely didn't have that risk capacity. So during COVID, when I was facing losses and whatnot, and that's when I decided that, hey, it's time to shut this business down and focus on myself and self growth and do something better. And then I kept on working in my family business for a couple of more years, and then finally decided that, hey, I'll go to US, I'll do my MBA, I'll educate myself, and I want to increase my risk taking capacity. Yeah, and so I moved here to study my MBA from Babson College 2023 September. And my first thought was that so Babson is known for its entrepreneurship program. My first idea was that I will restart my business. So when I came in, I had thought that the business that I had shut down, I'll do it here in US in a different way. But then I think Babson gave me more exposure towards the venture capital world. I had taken a few courses, and then we also have a Babson acceleration program, which is a student-run program wherein you get to support these startups that you incubate, and there's a pitch competition, and there are a lot of resources for a startup in Babson. And then I think I participated in this. Maybe you know about this competition called VCIC, Venture Capital Investment Competition. It took place in BU, Questum Business School at the time. And there if there you are evaluated on the fact that how good of an investor you were. So the competition's format is that a couple of founders will come, they will pitch, and you will evaluate them, and the judges there are evaluating you of how good an investor you are. And the judges turned out to be general partners from various funds. So I followed up with them, and then I went on coffee chats with them. And then I think that was the first time I spoke to a VC in the sense that, hey, I am an MBA student and I want to work in VC, and just tell me what you do and whatnot. And yeah, so many networking calls, and it finally happened. I met with my now senior investor on the team, my boss. He recruited me when I did a coffee chat with him, and then I had invited him as judge at that Babson Acceleration Club pitch competition. And I asked him, hey, you're thinking about recruiting anytime soon? He said that, hey, in summer we might be recruiting and you might be a fit. So why don't you interview with us? So I interviewed and Bank Tech finally happened. So yeah, a very long journey to finally land the role here.
And it happens, right? And that's all that matters. I'm curious, you said in BU, the competition.
VCIC, Venture Capital Investment Competition. I think it's a national competition, and we did the Northeast. So multiple schools compete. There was Babson, there was BU, I think there was Dartmouth, and a few other colleges. So it's like a inter-college competition. So you form teams and from each college, and then you all compete.
I'm curious on its format. Was all the founders like provide it, or were they just like founders who kind of signed up because they were student founders?
So I think at that time, during my time, those founders were, I think some of the deals were seed, some were series A. I think the organizers had brought their founder friends to come and pitch, and our job was to evaluate them. And you write a term sheet in the end, and then the way you are evaluated is based on how good of a questions you asked to the founders. And then in your term sheets, what terms did you write? Why did you write this term? Why did you put on this valuation? And, what's your thought process? So you are evaluated on that. So I think if you're doing your MBA and you want to get into VC, it's a good, if you win that competition, it will be good for you. I didn't win it. So on my resume, it said participated in that program. But it's a very good exposure that you get.
Yeah, and that's all it takes is that you just keep practicing and keep practicing. And I'm pretty sure that Ramika, you are definitely seeing like hundreds of pitch decks and also meeting with tons and tons of founders every day now. So you are 100%, 1,000% probably better than the winner if the winner has not become a VC yet. And that's all it takes. So just keep practicing. And for aspiring VCs listening to this, like that program, does it run year round? Or when does it usually run? Do you know?
I believe it's an annual competition, and maybe I can share the link with you after, and you can post it somewhere. I think the competition happens in January of each year, if I remember it correctly, and then you sort of form your team a few months in advance, and you just share your teams, and then I think there is some screening process also.
And I'll just put the link in the description below and you guys can check it out. So I know VC can be pretty tough with long hours, right? Like, we talked about it could be you doing stuff at any time, but at the same time, you have to be there. And it might not be for everyone. So who is VC not for?
I think VC is a very entrepreneurial job. It's not a 9 to 5 job. So if your expectations are that I will log in at 9 and I will log out at 5 and, go about my day, I don't think that this job is for you. We have our heavy days and we have our light days. Light days are very light. There are days when I'm meeting just with 2 or 3 founders, or maybe I'm just going to 1 or 2 events, and I will call that a light day. But then there are days when, multiple deals are live and you are evaluating which startup to invest in, and they all are very different in different stages. So you are doing market research on one, competitive research on the other, scheduling calls with the founders and their teams on other days. So there can be days when you log in at, let's say, 8 a.m. and you don't really log in. You just open up your phone at 8 a.m. and you're just working until you can't work anymore. And so it's like that. But I think why I like this job a lot is that, so when you are a startup founder or you're working in a startup, you have that hustle culture. You are hustling all day. But when you're a VC, you have to understand that now you're working with multiple founders. So you're sort of working with multiple startups now. So I think like in a startup, there is no 9 to 5, even if you want to call it culture or whatnot, but nobody really works 9 to 5 in a startup. And I think in VC also it's not like that. So VC is not for you if you are looking for that corporate role. It is also not for you if you need some clarity, or you need somebody, if you need rules, or if you need like a rule book that, hey, or if you need somebody to tell you all the time what to do. You have to be very entrepreneurial. You have to be sourcing deals. That means you are meeting people in person. You're also networking with others to get those deals. You're also cold reaching out to a lot of founders. You're trying to find the new hot startups. And there would be times when, for example, we invest in fintech. So there would be times when somebody who has worked in finance all their lives and now they have suddenly written on their LinkedIn that now they're a stealth founder, I would just DM them also that, hey, I want to know what you're building. Are you building something in fintech? And I want to know what they are doing. So, and you have to continuously educate yourself about the new technologies that are coming up. You know, how AI is moving so fast, how crypto is moving so fast. And every day a new concept comes in, every day a new company comes in, and you have to track all of those companies. And at the same time, you have to build your investment thesis around what I like, what I don't like, for example, we have about 120 banks as our LP. So what our banks want, and what the end customer wants. So it's that constant process of upskilling yourself, just like a software engineer. You want to learn about every new technology and every new tool. Similarly, I think in VC, you have to keep yourself up to date, at least in the sector that you are working in. For example, if I am in fintech, I need to know everything about that's happening that's touching the fintech space. I don't necessarily need to know about what's happening in biotech. That's irrelevant for me. But in the niche that you are playing in, I think it's that constant learning loop that you go through. Um,
Yeah, so talk about maybe the thesis of BankTech Ventures and then also, the type of founders that they invest in.
Right. So BankTech Ventures, we are a 115 million fund. We are backed by about a little more than 120 community banks in the United States. Our mandate is to invest in early stage companies that are building the future of banking, that can help a small community bank be competitive with the larger banks, the neo banks, private credit, and so much consolidation has been happening in the community banking space. So we are helping them be more digitally transformed. Until now, we've made about 26 investments, one exit from our fund one. Our scope is to invest in companies that can have a bank either as a customer or a partner. So we have invested in everything from fintech, but also cybersecurity, fraud, and compliance, and AI, and B2B SaaS. And ever since the Genius Act has come and now Clarity Act is coming, we have made two investments in the blockchain space as well, because now there is more clarity about how a bank can offer these stablecoin payment rails and whatnot. So yeah, and we are a little bit different than the regular VC fund. The regular VC model is investing in unicorn companies, but we are strategics and we are investing on behalf of banks. So we ideally want to invest in companies which will not go out of business, which will, so that if a company goes out of business, then it's bad for the banks, for our banks that are using it. So we want to invest in stable companies that will end up becoming good businesses. So we also use this analogy sometimes that we want to be the last check in the company, and not necessarily the first check. We typically do late seed series A, average check size 2 to 4 million. That is because we need to see some product market fit happening before we can come on the cap table. The companies that we invest in, we really believe in those startups and in those teams, and so that we can recommend them to the so many banks that we work with, and we can put our name behind those startups.
So is it unique? Like, is there any VC fund out there like this? Because ultimately, it's more of a strategic
Yeah.
CVC, right? Corporate venture
Yeah.
fund, where you
Yeah.
guys want to help create the next generation of founders that will become partners for these banks and use all these banks as services, right? And is there any other VC fund like this, or are you guys the only one that are backed by banks?
So how we are backed by banks? There's a fund which is backed just by credit unions, and I'm sure that there are a lot of VC models, and I think from the outside it seems like VC is just one model and it's just one structure. That is completely untrue, and I think students need to understand the various kinds of VC structures that exist. Yeah, we have in a CVC. Typically, it's one company and they have a corporate venture capital arm, but we are a corporate venture capital arm for these more than 120 banks. And then, if getting into VC is one thing, you can also think about getting into those corporate development roles. Those are very similar to a VC model because once a company, let's say a company has grown and they have, let's say, IPO'd, or they have a very good capitalization now and they are ready to buy other companies and integrate more technologies or grow in new geographies, then it's the same VC model. You are again sitting on the buy side. You are again finding out which companies you either want to invest in or you want to acquire. So VC role is very similar to a corporate development role. So when you think about getting a job, you don't have to necessarily narrow yourself towards venture capital or growth equity. You can also do corporate development, which is a very similar role.
Yeah, there's really tons and tons of models out there, but obviously like the hustle mentality, the startup ecosystem is mostly the same unless it's different series of stages. So does that mean that you guys don't really lead any investments? You guys only do, small checks, as in
No,
like,
we in fact mostly lead or co-lead. If we are coming into a road into a round, we will mostly be the lead investor. But if it's, let's say, a Series B round, which is a bit bigger for us, then we are happy to participate in that. But for a seed or a Series A, we are typically leading. Or if there is a good investor on table who wants to co-lead it with us, then we will co-lead.
yeah, it sounds like with 20-ish investment, you guys definitely had lots of dry powder, definitely at least some 50 mil. And talk about like, what are the top three things that you look for in startups when you're deciding whether or not to invest?
I think because we invest in such early stages, we are coming in at your seed round, and there's been some outliers also. We've done a pre-seed as well, but I'll call it an outlier, not our uh, standard fund thesis. But I think the companies are so early at this time. You are really taking a bet on the founder. And I think a lot of it comes down to how the founding team behaves and what their vision is. The number one, I think, why as investors we want to do so many meetings with those founders before we put in the final check is because we are evaluating them. I want to know that one, the founder is and the team is being honest with us. Number two, are they coachable? Do I want to work with them? Is this founder somebody I want to put my brand name behind and I want to speak on behalf of them? Um, and I think the third one is that is their vision matching with our vision, the direction that they want to go? Am I comfortable with going in that direction? Or do I want to go in one direction and they are thinking about going in another direction? So I think it all comes down to how transparent the team has been with us and what are their motivations and are they seeing what we are seeing, or maybe their vision is bigger and I was thinking small, and maybe I would love to ride along into that vision, but maybe they are going in a completely different direction, and there's definitely not a fit there in terms of what I want to achieve with this startup idea or whatnot. And of course, outside of team, there are all the other things. You want to know that the market is growing, that this product will sell, the product is addressing the right problems, it is the right solution for that problem, and all of those other things. But I think because you're so early and a lot of so at Babson and at BU, I know a lot of my juniors who are doing their MBAs or doing their masters in finance. They ask me this question a lot that, hey, I'm specializing in finance, how can I get into venture capital? And I tell them that, hey, finance is not the only skill that you need to become an investor. In fact, in early stage investing, finance might not even need to know how to build a model, because at least at a pre-stage level, the company can come with an idea on a paper. There are no financial statements, and at a seed stage it's maybe a year or 2 years of history and 5 years of projection, but we know that these numbers are wrong. We know that these projections are most probably not going to match the numbers because the stage is so early. But if you are somebody who is, studying finance and specializing in it, I think at Series A plus, as a Series B company comes, or even Series A also, once the company has some years of being present in the market and they have 5 years or 7, 8, 10 years of revenue, and then there are projections. At that time, your financial skills will come. At that time, you will take into those financial statements. And yeah, so in a growth stage investment, your financial skills will really come in hand. But in early stage, I'm not so sure if a finance person can get into, or VC, or just be a good venture capitalist just on the basis of a finance skill. I think if your firm invests in fintech, you need to have some understanding of financial technology. If they invest in biotech, then you need to have that background of life sciences or life sciences, and you need to understand the sector more than those financial skills.
Yeah, I'm curious as to the founders that you guys invest in, right? I know it's early stage, but could you go through like the structure of from the start of really getting that DM from the founder or getting that intro to that founder all the way to when you guys actually invest in that founder? And say like, for example, we meet the founder and then before the meeting, I would go through like a model or like some type of market analysis. And then during the meeting, we go through like a little bit of that. And then next meeting, we do this. Next meeting, we do that. And then lastly, we invest in them and time period. Just give me the structure of that.
Let's say you're a founder and it's the first time we both are meeting. So the first meeting is always very light. It's just an intro, and you want to sell to us, and we also want to sell to you because we want to be your investor, and there are so many investors out there, and we also want to. We are also selling a little bit, right? So it's a very casual 30-minute chat if it's an online first meeting, and we're just getting to know each other. And I think it's the first screening process also, wherein I'm just making sure that you fit into my thesis, that you are not too early for me, you're not too late stage for me, you are building something for my banks. And so I think these small checklist that all of us carry, that can be screened in the first call. So let's call it a first 30-minute intro call, nothing serious. And then you will send me your pitch deck, and I will go through it. I will do my due diligence, and I will look at, without you sending me the data room yet, but I would still, just from the pitch deck and your website, or maybe you send me a demo, I'm going to look at what the competitive landscape is. I'm going to think about where the market is going. I'm going to think about, are my banks going to use this product or not? So, and then I will have my questions. And then when we meet on the second call, it is usually either a demo call, or if you already did demo on your first call, then it's just a Q&A and a discussion call. And I'm just trying to address all the questions that I had for you. And then I think the second call is when you can really go deep into anything and everything. You can talk about the integration with those banks, and what your vision is, and are you building to exit very soon? Are you looking to get acquired, or are you thinking about doing an IPO, or you want to be just a lifestyle business? And what, as a founder, what your vision is? And so that's the second call. And then you will probably, if you have a data room, you will send me over that, and then we will dig into everything from your financial history to your team to your all the documents that you send us, right? And again, from there will be a lot of red flags and green flags. We will address the red flags, and we will discuss internally, hey, we really like these green flags. Because of these green flags, we think that we want to work with this founder. And then again, if there are more questions, again, there'll be a little bit of to and fro. And then finally, I think the way we make decisions is that our internal investment team, everybody has to sort of agree that whether they like the investment or not. We all are each other's biggest critiques, and it's possible that my colleague brought a deal, and I will be honest with her and say that, I don't, these are my questions, these are the risks that I see. Then finally, when there's an internal discussion, the deal goes to the investment committee. We make sure that we introduce the startup founding team to all of our investors and everybody in the team. And because we work with our banks, there are times we would also connect them with one of our banks and just get feedback from that bank that whether they would want to work with this startup or not. Do they think that they want to be a customer of this startup or not? And I think that's a very good validation point for us. Yeah. And then it goes to our investment committee. There are general partners there. And then general partners at the end of the day decide whether or not it's going to be an investment. That's the process that you go through when you're making an investment from scratch.
And I guess like, is there an average of how much months or weeks until, from the first meeting to that investment?
There is no set timeline either for us or any other VC fund out there. It really depends on if I knew you from a year ago, then we already have an established relationship. I already maybe trust you. That's why after a year, I'm still wanting to talk to you. But if you're a complete stranger and I'm meeting you for the first time today, then it becomes a bit harder. And that's when it can take more time. That's when I will probably call people who you have worked with before, or just get your try to understand who you are and just do some background check also. So that takes time. I think, which is why I always, a founder I meet with, I always encourage that, hey, even if you are a pre-seed stage today and I can't invest in you today, but start that relationship today so that in 1 year time I can invest in you. In 1 year time, we have an established relationship. I trust you and you trust my fund, and I track you throughout that year and I look at your progress, then I just have more conviction in you. And I think it's always good to start these relationships early.
Yeah, I know you are a natural at building relationships. We're going to talk about, starting relationships and maintaining relationships with people who are more experienced or senior than you. So let's talk about for VCs, right? How can you start a relationship with a VC for, all the aspiring VCs listening to this?
If you are a student, I think when I was a student, my process was to just cold DM people on LinkedIn or email them that, hey, and my exact words used to be, hi, I'm Rumika Sharma, an MBA student at Babson College. I am looking to make a transition into the venture capital world. I would love to meet you over coffee or virtually to get your 2 cents about this industry. These lines always worked. If the VC was too busy, they will still give me their virtual time. If they had some time, they were very generously meet me over coffees. And I can tell you that I must have met with at least 40 or 50 people, a mix of VCs and people in PE and founders and whatnot. I think when you're a student, the professionals who are working in the industry, they see that you want to learn and they are more than happy to teach you and, help you grow. And everybody is also thinking about their next talent that they are looking for, and they will take those calls or meetings just to see that maybe you are a fit for me. And, they are evaluating you. So every time I would meet with these VCs, so our college had given us access to PitchBook, and which is you know about that too, right? Yeah. So our college had given us access to PitchBook. So every time I would go meet a VC, I would just quickly read through all of the deals that they have done, the stages that they invest in, and I would always have questions around. I would go in with like 50 questions, and in those 30 minutes to 1 hour, he will answer a few. And
Wait, how do you do that? Go a little more detail.
yeah, so I think my questions have changed over time. I still meet with new GPs, but as an MBA student, it was everything from, hey, what do you think? The questions that you wanted to ask me, hey, where is fintech going? And I was always more curious about understanding how they make these decisions. So what's your decision making process? Sometimes I would ask that, hey, I saw that you have invested in this company. I want to know how you invested, what was your thought process doing it, and then I would ask them for tips on how to, again, like you're asking, how to network well and what all do I need to do to be a good investor. And a lot of them will tell me that, Rumika, you need to learn to read people. You need to listen to things that the founder is not telling you. You need to figure out what they are hiding, because most of the times people are hiding something, and you need to learn to do these things, and you need to start building your gut checks. A lot of times the paperwork will look really great, but your gut will tell you that no, we shouldn't be doing this deal. A lot of good advices I got from these people who are very generous with their time. I think I also volunteered with Startup Boston as an MBA. I volunteered with them, organized a couple of events with them. That's where I met with my now manager. It was through Startup Boston. I think it gave me access to a lot of VCs also, because they were doing so many panels and they needed people to speak on those panels. So I just took the job of reaching out to these VCs, and instead of now being an MBA student, I was a volunteer for Startup Boston. And I would say, hey, I'm this investor track lead at Startup Boston, reaching out for this event. And so many people who I had brought on as panelists, I got on coffee chats with them after, and they were very generous about it. And it's these little things. And before I landed this role, I was at Milemark Capital, that invested in mostly in applied AI, deep tech space. They have made a lot of investments in the MIT ecosystem. But before that as well, I did a lot of venture scouting roles. So if you know about Level Up Ventures, and there are so many VC funds who have these, you're like you're somebody who's giving them deals for free. But the caveat is that if they do end up investing in that deal, you will get 5% of the 20% carry that the fund makes. But I think even if it was, they were not paying me anything, I got a very big, good exposure, because I started doing venture scouting for about, I think, 7 or 8 funds. And I would just reach out. I would put on my LinkedIn that, hey, I'm sourcing deals for so many funds. And founders would start reach out to me, or I would reach out to founders. And whenever I spoke to them, the value addition that I was bringing to them was that I can share your startup with these 7 or 8 funds, right? And because of that, those founders will talk to me. So I think I must have spoken to about 100 founders, and made them do proper pitches on a 30-minute calls and whatnot. So that made me behave like a VC. That made me think like a VC. So I think that was a very good foundation for me to to be a better investor, and that's how I was able to crack my interviews and whatnot. Yeah, so venture scouting is a very good way to break into to get your first internship or your first job, because it's
Okay,
free. All you have to do is sign up.
yeah, we're gonna make sure to come back to knowing what founders actually are and what they're hiding. And also we're gonna go back to scouting. And then, so now we talked about starting that relationship, right? How do you maintain it? Like, you already got the meeting, you guys are vibing. How do you maintain that relationship even after that meeting?
I think for if for the VCs that are living in Boston, it's a bit easier, because I would then see them in their events, or I would see them in an ecosystem event where they would be there, and I would just bump into them. And it happens so many times that somebody who I met in the first semester of my MBA, I still keep on bumping into them so many times. And I think when I got my first venture scouting role, I reached out to them that, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Just keep on updating them about the various life events that are happening with you. When I got my first venture scouting role, then when I landed my first internship, my second internship, my first full-time role, I always informed them. And with some of them, I met with a follow-up coffee chat that, hey, we met initially and I wanted to get into VC. And then I met with them that, hey, now I am a VC. How do I become better at my job? So that's a very good way of maintaining that relationship. And so many times it has happened that, so Boston has a lot of the founding ecosystem. There are a lot of founders here. The ecosystem is so good. So there were times when I'm we invest in fintech, but I still meet with a lot of health tech or biotech people, and I send those deals to the other people who I know who invest in those spaces. And I think just sharing these deals and just this is the only way to maintain a relationship, right? And just engage with them and whatnot.
So in terms of that, right? Is it just like sharing milestones? Be a little more detailed on, let's say you met the VC again in the event. Maybe you have like 5 minutes or maybe even 1 or 2 minutes. What do you say? Is it just like, hey, I've got this internship. We were talking earlier and that's it? Or is there anything else?
It's not that. I think when I did not have that internship also, and when I met them and I saw on LinkedIn that this person knows this person and I wanted to interview at that firm, then I just said that, hey, if you know this firm, can you please put in a good word for me because I am recruiting for them. There are a lot of ways to engage with these investors, and also for if somebody is not in Boston and they are in San Francisco and whatnot. I have done a lot of intros also. I have connected not just founders with those investors, but also other investors or ecosystem players with those people. For example, this guy who invests in India, he's from here. He's an American, but he has taken all the exposure in India. So I have connected him with so many people from India. They are either founders or they are doing something with the ecosystem or with the government. But he recognizes that I am in touch with them, and it always helps. So a lot of way to maintain these relationships.
Yeah, that's literally one of the best ways is sharing those deal flows, even though it might not be for your fund's thesis or for your scouting those thesis, right? You can always send it to those VCs who their thesis fits for that founder that you have met. That's literally one of the best things ever. So talk about, let's say, you are in one of those scouting roles, right? And then you got that 30-minute meeting with that founder because they're like, "Oh my gosh, you have like so many scouting roles and then you have access to these VC funds. You can help me pitch them." So you've got this 30 minutes and it's probably just going to be one meeting, right? Because they're like, "Oh, it's a scout or it's an intern." What do you truly ask them in that 30 minutes to even dissect like what are they hiding from you? How do you get the most information so then the VCs can actually make a decision on should I actually meet this founder or not? So what goes on in that 30 minutes?
I think in a venture scouting role specifically, and just on the first 30-minute call, like I said, it's you don't go much in detail, but you are still doing your initial screening. So when I am meeting with you, when you tell me that you are a healthcare company, then I'm connecting the dots that I'm going to connect you with that healthcare investor who I am scouting for. If you say that you are an applied AI company, then I'll connect you with the second fund that I work with. So it's really the screening process of sectors and then check sizes, which stage are you in, what's your revenue size, what's your last valuation, what are you thinking about your next valuation. And before you make that intro to that VC firm, you have to build that conviction that do I really want to share this startup with them? Do I really like what the startup is doing, and is there really enough market? So you are doing your initial due diligence in a very basic way without going too much in detail, but you are building that
No,
conviction
please
that
go on into detail.
yeah, no, at that time you're not going in that much detail is what I'm saying. You only
Yeah,
have a
yeah, yeah,
pitch
okay,
deck
okay.
at that time. And then you're just, and I always thought of it like that if I am the investor, do I want to invest in this company? And if I do, only then I would make those connections. And if I did not, out of the 100 founders, let's say that I met with, I would have connected only 30 or 40 of those to those VCs. The rest, 60 or 70, I did not connect because I didn't think that they had built enough yet or they had explored the market yet. And a lot of times those founders were just building in a box and they were not thinking about the competition. They didn't know who else is building it. They didn't even know who are the incumbents in the market. They didn't know who they are going to be potentially replacing or potentially working with or competing against. Yeah, I think the worst red flag that I see in a company or in a founder is that they just don't know about their competition, and it's just so simple so easy to do previously a basic Google search and now a chat GPT question or a deep research question. But I think that's the biggest red flag for me when the person just doesn't know about the market that they are building and they're just building a product. I think a product is not the whole company. You need to understand the broader macroeconomics and understand the market structure and how the market works when you're building in a certain space. Yeah, so a lot of these soft and hard decisions that you make, and based on that, I used to make those intros.
Yeah, and it's actually more common than, aspiring VCs think that these founders actually just build in a box. Cause like I think like 1 in 4 founders that I meet is like that. So let's say you do have sort of conviction into that founder and based on like the VCs that right? How much founders did you send to each VC? And is it like once every month? Is it once every year? Like what did that look like? Or did you
I
just
think
kind of
I did I did venture scouting for I think my third semester and second semester. So I sort of did for like 9 months. Those 9 months, my goal was to I didn't send a lot of startups to all of the funds, but depending on the thesis, I would try to connect once or one or two startups a week to some of those venture funds. Some of the funds were very good. So let's say especially Level Up Ventures. So when they did their
they
second call,
want you to.
yeah, they get you also on the call, so they give you that exposure of how they are now evaluating them. And this other fund that I have such if you want to be a VC, build a good memory because I really struggle with it. I don't have a I forget names. I forget names of companies. I forget nouns. So this other VC fund that I was sourcing for, and they were also very generous about bringing you also to the second call if they want to talk to that startup. So that's a good exposure as a student to understand how VC works. 100 points on doing the venture scouting roles.
What did the email look like to that VC? Was it just like a short 2 lines? Hey, I met this founder. I have really strong conviction on them. They seem like a pretty cool person. And then you give like a 1 page memo, or did you even do that?
No, I would just forward the pitch deck, and every VC fund has had its own process. For example, somebody would have like an online form that you had to fill, and the other fund would want an email introduction, and third one would just want them to pitch again on their website. So every fund has its own process, and depending on that, I would make those intros. But I never wrote those investment memos during my scouting. I just shared the pitch decks and like my 2 cents why I think they are investable, why I think you should talk to them. And I think that was it.
And give me an example, because like I know Level Up is a little bit special, where they kind of just like, hey, send us as much as you can, and then we also reward you. But then let's say you're building a relationship with a VC, right? They're your friend. It would be like through email where you guys kind of just communicate. What would that 2 cents look like? Give me like an example. Hey, I met
I
this founder.
Yeah, I met with this founder and they fit with your thesis, the check size in your sector. I really like what they are building. I see a lot of market potential. If you want to put in any data around the market opportunity, you can do that. But really what you really saw in that founder or in that startup, I think was I don't really remember all those emails, but that was the format. It was very natural. There was no standard way of writing it, so I never thought about writing it in one way.
Like what would you want to see as a VC? Would you want to see like, hey, okay, this founder fits your thesis of being a Series A startup, and then I met with them, had a really great conversation. I think they are like their team is strong because, and then that's it, or do you still need more? Like, what are the juicy parts that the VC investors want to hear?
I think I want to hear whether what you thought about the team. I want to hear exactly what problem they are solving and whether you think that this product is the right way to solve that problem. And I want to know that you are sending me a company that is you understand my thesis that you know that this company can have a bank as a customer or a partner. So those basic things are all I need for the first introduction, and then rest of the things I can, when I meet with the founder, I can figure that out. I just don't want you to send me something that's irrelevant or that's, not ready for an investment yet.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Understand the thesis really well and then show the VC why you believe in the founder and their capabilities. So
Yeah.
that's basically the 2 cents
Yeah.
for Remington.
Don't send me random fintech companies just because I invest in fintech. Send me companies that actually are doing something within the banking ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. And a really good way to do that is basically just look at the portfolio companies right now, right? And see what's in them.
Yeah.
Is that true?
No, I think you would also understand that if I'm investing in banking, there are certain trends that are out there, and my portfolio companies have already covered most of it. So what's next? What is the next investment you think I should be making? If there is already, let's say a data insights company in my portfolio, why would you send me another data insights company? Because I've already made one investment in that space. So send me a company which is not in my portfolio yet. Don't send me something that is competing. For example, we have made that investment in a company called Stablecore, which is building infrastructure for banks to enable them to offer stablecoin payment rails and whatnot. And so don't send me another company which is doing infrastructure for banks to enable them to offer stablecoins. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go. That's how you do it. And I guess hey, talk about the Boston ecosystem, right? It sounds like you're pretty integrated into the Boston ecosystem. You know pretty well like what's going on, how to find all these VCs. So what like talk about for an aspiring VC could be an MBA student, right? What actually is the access that they have into the Boston VC ecosystem? Do they go to Startup Boston? Do they go to like these like reoccurring events in some type of niche location? Where are all those events?
I would say download Luma on your phone, and there are
Okay.
so many good events happening in Boston every day. Every single day, there's a startup ecosystem or a founder event or an investor event, and there are so many events that I get invited to, and I don't end up going because there's just so many, and I don't have that much of time. But Startup Boston is there. Startup Boston has a website. They have an event calendar, and every day you will see there are multiple events happening. Depending on what you want to do, depending on you wanting to invest in AI or biotech or health tech or fintech or deep tech or whichever robotics, whichever your climate, whichever your preference and your skill set is, go to those events. For example, there are so many climate events happening in Boston. The ecosystem is very strong for that. But I don't go to those events because I don't invest in that
Sure.
and I don't know much about that sector. But there are a lot of good fintech events happening here, and I make sure that I go to those ones. And yeah, I think there are a lot of founder only events, and then there are also a lot of ecosystem showcase events also that are happening. So these various organizations will do their stalls and just meet with them and just ask them if you want to, maybe volunteer with them in their upcoming events. I think as a student, volunteering is a very good way to start building those relationships because you are out there and you are working with them. It's not a one way ask. It's a two way. You are giving me something and I am giving you something back. Volunteering is a good way. Yeah, the Boston has a lot of events every day. I had an event that I missed in the morning today because I had another call. But now there's an event happening in the evening also, which I hope that I don't miss. I should be able to make it. And my calendar is full of different types of events. Yeah.
Yeah, and we love events. So, aspiring VCs in Boston, maybe even volunteer for Startup Boston, just like Ramika, and you might meet your future VC employer or maybe even friend that you can just send deals to. So, looking kind of ahead, right? Like what trends in venture capital are you most excited about?
given that we work Given that we invest in banking, understand that the bigger umbrella is that it's a regulated industry, and then as of today there are only two types of investment themes that I'm seeing, one in AI and the other one in stable coins, or let's call it blockchain, right? In AI, there is AI in anti-money laundering and credit underwriting and back-end operational efficiencies, and every part of the banking ecosystem, AI is going to be there. And in every industry, AI is getting in to help the people make decisions faster, do their work faster, and increase their efficiency and all of that. But then with AI, risks are also coming, right? Now you are your next investment is also going to be about risk management of the decisions that AI made. So because it is so regulated, compliance, regulation, AI risk. And then on the other side, on the blockchain side, especially within banking now, because people have started using this alternative money, the banks are losing out on the fees that they make from a wire transfer. And banks also want you to now, they don't want to lose their customer. That's why they want to offer these stable coins and other blockchain technologies and offerings. Now we are seeing with more and more regulation clarity coming that these banks can offer these stablecoin payment rails, but what would it be? Is it still going to be the Tether and Circle as the two main stablecoin currencies that are being exchanged, or is each bank going to issue its own stablecoin? Or now we are seeing that in the alternative blockchain digital asset markets, there's real world asset tokenization is happening and people are making yields. So as of today, the banks are not offering these yields, but are they going to do it in the future? So a lot of such conversations are yet to happen, and a lot of such conversations are happening, and everybody is working on thinking about what the future of banking is, given that blockchain is here to stay. So as the regulations become more clear, and then you start seeing more investments or maybe less investments in this space, depending on where the market goes. Maybe crypto does not become mainstream. You don't know that yet. Yeah, but more and more on the AI part, it's very clear. AI is, last year everybody was still thinking about, hey, which use cases can I automate? But this year everybody has sort of automated, and now they're thinking about, hey, how do I manage risk around it? How do I make sure that my customer info will not get leaked? How do I tackle deep fakes, and how do I make sure that the documents that are coming in are legit, and the person who is talking to me on screen is not a bot, and it's Zoom and it's a real human. And, yeah, so with AI, there is, you invest in AI and then you invest in risk and then you invest in crypto and maybe think about what's happening. And just also, yeah, and outside banking, just on the fintech side, I think prediction markets are becoming big. Kalshi
Oh
and
my gosh, Kelsey,
uh,
Polymarket, you see it like all the time.
I think it's going to be regulated now. So a lot of conversations are happening around how to regulate this part. Is it betting is not legal, but are we doing it legally, or what's happening there? So a lot of good stories are about to come up.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about startups is that it's almost like it's just like on that border of like what's legal and what's not. And Kaushi kind of did it by like just doing it and then waiting for like regulation to come.
Sorry about regulation.
Yeah, yeah, which is freaking crazy, right? Like, I mean, that's such a huge risk, and all these VC are funding them, and they also like have like tons of customers as well. So it's like if they fail, that's like little catastrophe. But that's the thing about the startup world is that there's just so much uncertainties, but it definitely is a trend. So okay, let's talk about how to break into VC. I know you talked a little bit about it for our viewers who need an actionable plan to implement right away, what would be your theoretical 6 month plan to fully break into VC for MBAs and maybe international students? And to say like month one, two, three, four, five.
I think from day zero, start doing your cold outreaches and start your building your network from day zero. As you're listening to this, just write a LinkedIn post note to somebody and just send a connection request that you want to meet them. That's the first step. And then parallelly, try to understand how this VC ecosystem works, understand portfolio maths, understand deal terms, understand what pre-money valuation and post-money valuation means, and what exit scenarios can mean, and understand all the jargon that a VC might use. That's the second thing. Thirdly, I would say when you interview with a VC firm, all they are trying to evaluate you on is that can this person do the job? Whenever I am talking to somebody, I am representing Bank Tech Ventures, I'm representing a bank. Can they trust you to represent their firm? When you talk to a founder, would you understand the technology that they have built? So, do you have that acumen of understanding the various nuances of technology? And then whichever sector you want to get into, I think it's in these 6 months also think about what you bring to the table, what dots you can connect. Are you somebody who understands software well and you can do software? Are you somebody who has spent their whole life and or know more about the consumer goods, and can you do consumer more? For example, I am from India. I have built a brand in India. I can do consumer very well, but I don't think I can do it well here in US because I don't understand the US consumer as well as good as I understand the Indian consumer. I don't know that growing up which candies you like, or there are so many cultural nuances which I don't know. But banking I could do because I've always have worked with the bank, and back in India how we have community banks here. We also have small banks back there, and we switched from a smaller bank to a larger bank, and I understood why we switched and what were the problems, and turned out this was a universal problem that I could relate here. So just network your way up, understand the nuances and the jargon and the maths so that you can crack an interview. Whenever you go on a networking call, just read about their portfolio and their investment thesis and go with good questions when you're talking to them. Think of these networking chats as informal interviews. If my senior investor recommended to me to the rest of the team for an interview, that's because I sort of impressed him in that coffee chat. It was an informal interview. And then he just gave me a formal interview, right? And so just and hustle a lot, I think. For my MBA friends, my juniors who have been reaching out to me, I'm just telling them that hey, don't worry about your grades, don't worry about your exams, worry more about networking and talking to people and landing a job at this time because it's your last semester or last year to find that job. And I think put 100% efforts in just getting those referrals from people. And in VC, at least, the hiring happens through word of mouth and not through the cold applications. I think the percentage of people who get into venture capital through cold application, I'm sure it's very low. So, yeah.
Yeah, talk about, well, since we're on the topic of interviews, right? Talk about your interview with Malmark and also with Fentech. What was the process like?
Both the interviews were very simple.
Yes.
I had were very similar. I'm sorry, similar. There were 2 rounds. I met with 2 people. The first round usually is that you have to go in and pitch a deal. So make sure that the deal that you are bringing and then you're pitching to them is relevant to them. When they go off camera, they think about that, hey, they actually look into the website of that company and actually think about making an investment of that in that company. So in both the funds, I sort of pitched a deal, and you won't have a pitch deck. And at Bank Tech Ventures, because we invest in banking, I had brought a deal which could have a bank as a customer, which met the investment thesis. It was, I think, a Series A deal. And then you talk about everything from problem, solution, and like a founder, how you will pitch. And then also like an investor, how you would pitch in an investment committee. So you tell them about the competitive landscape, the market, and why you think you should be investing, and what's the pre-valuation, what's the post-valuation, and then there will be some Q&A based on that deal pitch, and you answer that. Um, and then the second part of the interview is that you just make them trust you that, hey, I can do the job, and just tell them that I'm the right person to represent your brand and then to talk to hundreds of people on behalf of you. You're just selling yourself in those interviews.
I'm curious, based on the specific of, you bring a deal, right? Did you know the founder beforehand of the deal that you brought? Did you have some internal information that can't really be searched? Or was it just like, hey, I kind of just found this company and I just brought it on?
The way it had happened for me was that right before my interview, a day before my interview with BankTech Ventures, I was on a coffee chat with this other investor who I told that, hey, tomorrow I have an interview with this company. And he gave me that deal and he said, hey, this is my portfolio company. Why don't you pitch it during your interview? And he told me everything about. And so when I'm having that coffee chat with him, I just asked him a couple of questions that they would potentially ask me that I can answer to them. So yeah, so usually, and it was a very good fit. So even if let's say that coffee chat had not happened, I would have done another deal. I would have still looked at found out a company which is on a seed or series A stage, which can have a bank as a customer, and I would have found this deal from PitchBook or from anywhere on the internet. And just for example, if you want to uh, pitch something to a healthcare investor, and you'll just think about what are the new trends, what are the upcoming trends. Let's say GLP is a trend, and then you will try to find a company which is doing something within GLP, and then you'll make sure that they invest in Series A, B, C, and then you'll find that company from PitchBook. It's not so hard to find it, and there's everything on websites. So you just have to be smart about your investment thesis and just tell them that I understand your company well or your firm well, and because I understand it, I can do the job well. So that's all you're doing in that interview.
That's actually so smart, where it's like if two firms have the same or similar thesis, right? And then they're investing in different stages. Let's say one firm is like early stage, so pre-seed to seed. And then the other firm, for example, BankTech, is Series A. Then what would happen is you can just get the VC from like the earlier stages to tell you like exactly why they would invest in that company. Like that's even more legit than like a founder telling you, because a VC telling you why they would invest would just like match their similar thinking. So
Yeah,
if you do that, you
no,
basically
that's
get, yeah,
you're
a
you're
meeting with two
giving a
VCs.
No, no, you're giving a good analysis, but it's not practical. It just happened by chance that I was meeting this other VC a day before. But imagine you've gotten an interview with this healthcare venture capital firm today. It's just hard to have another coffee chat with somebody who's early stage. So it looks good on paper, but it's not practical. Strategy is not practical.
Well, I don't know about that because, like, if I was a VC, right, at like an early stage, and then you are basically like getting that deal in front of another VC at like a later stage, and that VC probably has never looked at it yet, then I would be down. Like, I would be down since you already have the interview, right? Like, this is on the assumption that you have the interview. If you don't have the interview, then yeah, doesn't matter, right? But if I was a VC, in that early stage fair, I will 100% meet with you. Like, I'm not even kidding.
And this is how we get deals in real life also, right?
Yeah.
We are like working with other VC investors, and let's say you pitch to me, you're not really building for banking, but you're a fintech firm, and there's this other fintech firm which doesn't necessarily invest just in banking, but they invest in fintech. So I'll just share your deal with that investor. And that's how we are getting warm intros from each other, and that's how it works in real life also. And if you can do it
All right.
for the you, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it might sound like simple, but then that's really all it is that you have to find deal flow, and wherever you get it from, you have to find it. And once you do, and you get good deal flow and they invest in it, you've made a great contribution. So now for a few rapid fire questions to wrap up. A few words or one sentence. Wedding place in Boston that you always go to. A little niche spot.
I love working from Capital One at Assembly Row. I've taken a lot of meetings there. It has those two pods that you can book for your private meetings also. So one, I like the area. Second, you get your private space to do some meetings.
Oh, okay. What is a place that you haven't traveled to yet but want to? I might know this one.
I think I really, and you will laugh at me, I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
not
yeah.
been to San Francisco yet.
What?
I am a VC and I've not been to San Francisco yet. I need to go to West Coast, and I think the day I go there, I will just stay there forever. And
What is one fun fact about you most people don't?
just exactly this. In my previous life, I was doing what graphic design, filmmaking, animation, websites, and whatnot, which has nothing to do with venture capital if you think about it. Usually, when you think about VC, you would try to put that person in a bucket. It's just I'm not from that bucket. It's a very different background. I call it my previous life now.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty crazy. Is there any thoughts you want to finish or we didn't get to cover on this pod that you would like to talk about?
I think given that I am an immigrant and I'm not from this country, I think the hardest part of landing a role in venture capital as a as an immigrant is that you need to understand the local environment and the local ecosystem and the psychographics, the demographics of the country that you are working in. I think you, because at the end of the day, the startups that you are investing in are catering to the demographic of that country. So whether you're migrating from US to Europe or you're coming from India to US, just always remember that at the end of the day, your investment is going to serve the local demographic. And if you don't understand that demographic, it will be very hard for you to make those investment decisions. For example, I had never banked with the community banks that I invest on behalf of. So it was a very sharp learning curve for me to understand how community banking works in US, who are the regulators, what are the problems that these banks are facing, and also their customers are facing, because I've not been a customer of these banks. I only had a Bank of America account, savings account. But you will also get to connect those dots. For example, back in India, I could connect dots that, hey, I was banking with this small banking institution there, and then I switched to a bigger institution. And why did I switch? That's the exactly decision making that the local customer here is taking, and when they are switching their banks and whatnot. And as an immigrant, you can't learn all of these skills by reading a book. You have to talk to people, and you have to, whatever you're trying to learn and understand, the best way to do it is by just talking to people, and just asking stupid questions. You can't imagine how many stupid questions I must have asked people in very basic. Uh, but people are generous, and then they see your intent and they see that you're not here to waste their time. You actually want to learn something, and they help you with it.
Yeah, and it could be a strength or weakness because if you have all of this like international perspective, maybe it's done better in some way or somehow. So you can see like the innovation before it even happened. But then, like you said, although it is a strong learning curve, you are a genuinely curious person. So it's working out amazing for you. So that was amazing, Ramika. For anyone listening to this and want to learn about you or your firm, what's the best place to reach you?
You can DM me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach out, and we can always schedule something after that.
Is your fund, does it have a VC internship program or hiring for roles right now?
As of today, we are not hiring, but if you are interested, we are always looking for, maybe you can bring um, another skill set that we are missing, and always happy to look at and talk to future prospective interns.
Yeah. And guys, remember, Ramika started as a summer analyst or a summer analyst intern, right? So she literally got promoted to full time. Awesome. Thank you again. And thanks to everyone who's listening. Comment a question you want to hear from Ramika or our next guest. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who's interested in getting the venture. We'll see you next time on Break into AC.
Thank you.